Group.
Thank you, President, and thanks to all the speakers for their informative presentations. I have one question about the Chinese economy that people might comment upon, and then a point about wages and conditions in China. My question about the Chinese economy is that obviously you've had phenomenal growth rates for an extended period of time, and China was able to avoid the worst of the crisis 2 to 3 years ago on the basis of significant stimulus programs, the role of the state in the economy and so on. But it does seem, increasingly reading material, that increasingly there's elements within the Chinese economy that are akin to many of the problems that face the European economies in advance of the crisis, in the sense of increasingly a bubble-driven economy, large amounts of speculation and a growing level of debt. I remember perhaps a year ago it featured in the financial press quite a bit about a major bubble in China, and at the moment probably a more significant bubble, but from what I'm reading in terms of property in China and how significant that is, that apparently housing prices have risen across the country by 140% since 2007, and in Beijing around 800% over the course of 8 years. And that, I mean, to some extent, when you're reading it, it reminds me of Ireland 3 to 4 years ago, but on a massive, massive scale, that you have increasing numbers of ghost housing estates being built, all built on a speculative bubble, people investing in the expectation that prices go up and go up and go up, with the result that, like in Ireland, well, in Ireland you have tens of thousands of empty houses, but apparently in China you have 64 million Chinese apartments vacant at this stage, and that number is still growing. So just the prospects for, and then linked to that is the development of debt, government debt on a level, particularly local government debt, that didn't exist previously. The prospect for these internal contradictions within the Chinese economy to come to the fore and to impact on growth levels, and perhaps the bubble bursts at a certain stage. The second point is, well, just a major aspect of this imbalanced trade, like Yannick spoke about, is the question of wages and conditions, what you referred to as a competitive advantage in terms of levels of wage levels in China. That is crucial here, both in terms of the cost of production for firms producing in China, but also then the absence of demand for consumer goods within China because the workers receive very, very little. There's a new study out from an NGO called China Labour Watch about tragedies of globalisation, the truth behind electronic sweatshops, which goes into 10 different case studies of multinational companies operating in China with subcontractors like Foxconn and the other companies like that, and the conditions that exist there. And it does illustrate the point that the gross exploitation that happens in China, and it's on a vast scale. You're talking about 19th century conditions in these factories where people don't get enough through their wages and conditions without doing overtime to be able to survive. They aren't even subsistence wages. They have to do massive overtime to be able to survive. But that European and US-based multinational corporations are also involved in this and are also profiting from this. There's a startling statistic about Apple, that the total cost of, if you go and buy an iPhone 4 from Apple in America directly without a subsidy from a provider, it's $600. Of that $600, $6.54 goes to the assembly costs. So it goes to Foxconn, of which a tiny percentage then goes in turn to the worker who produced the iPhone. $360 apparently goes in profits, the others in materials and so on. And it's illustrative of the fact that, multinational it isn't only the Chinese corporations that are involved in this, and absolutely they are, and are involved in gross exploitation, but also the Western-based multinationals are also getting in on the act in terms of the opportunity for extremely cheap labour with very little rights and conditions for workers.